Hello and welcome to the Resilient Catholic. I am Lisa Rumpel, your host, and today on my podcast, I have a special guest and dear friend, Stephanie Gray Connors. Stephanie Gray Connors is an acclaimed pro-life activist and author with over 1,000 pro-life lectures under her belt, including a much talked about presentation at Google headquarters in 2017. She has traveled the world promoting the dignity of the human person. She continues her work of communicating truth in a post-truth era and plans to release another book in 2021. And you can learn more about Stephanie's work on her website, Love Unleashes Life. Welcome, Stephanie. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you, Lisa. It's awesome to be on. My only wish is that we were in person.
I know, in a coffee shop somewhere.
Yes, exactly.
And you're in Florida now, so that can't happen, but we have done some virtual coffee times, which is great.
We have, and it's always been life affirming every time, but there is nothing like in the flesh. So I look forward to when we can be reunited.
I wanted to have you on my podcast because last year in 2019, it was a hard year for me at times. I was going through ups and downs with my mental illness, experiencing depression, hypomania, and it was like the Lord just knew I needed a good friend who could spend some time with me, and we connected. I mean, we had met like maybe years before this at playing ukulele on the beach, doing sunset singing. I think that was our first kind of meeting. But I think last year, in February, you had started a book club, and we were reading John O'Leary's book On Fire. And you invited me, and then we started connecting, and you found out that I had a ukulele, and so we had music jams, and so that the music jams became book club, and then we discovered that we're both writers. I'm writing a memoir. I write for the BC Catholic, a column. And you've written a book, you're writing your second book. And so we had so many little connections and little similarities that we just forged this friendship, very strong bond, I feel, over a short period of time.
Yeah. When I think back to the last year as well, it also was a very tough year for me. And it's just so beautiful to see how God carries us in our pain. And one of the ways he carried me, just as he carried you, was indeed forging, I would say, a deeper friendship. Because as you say, over the last few years, there've been these various social gatherings where we've gotten together. But actually, when you talk about just the growth of our friendship, and last year in particular, what comes to mind is something one of my friends told me, which is that in her daughter's elementary school, whenever they see a close friendship forming, apparently the teachers don't allow that to happen.
That's crazy.
And then they steer the kids in a direction to just play with other kids so that they get to know everyone. And I actually found that very troubling. And it's not that I think it's wrong to get to know everyone. I think it's important to be kind to everyone, to know everyone in your class's name. But the reality is you can't be special friends with every single person. So what often I think are the best friendships are friendships that aren't forced, where a teacher is like, you must sit with this student and be friends with them. But rather they just evolve organically. And often when you identify what makes you come alive, what are your passions, your interests, and you dive into those things, then you will naturally encounter other people who have those similar passions that will draw you closer than perhaps other people. And then it forges this bond that is really special. And so that's what I feel happened is as I started really thinking, okay, Lord, like, in this rough season, what makes me come alive? Music makes me come alive. And not just music by myself, which for some people that's all they need. But it's music. I'm okay playing my ukulele and singing in public. And when I discovered you were okay with that too, then it's like, okay, now I have a friend who will like go to a park with me. And so it's been great.
Yeah, I mean, like I think of the time like on a Sunday we'd gone to mass at St. Patrick's, and then we took our ukuleles and we went to Queen Elizabeth Park and we're playing there. And I think it was during cherry blossom season.
It was like cherry blossom like day.
Yes, it was beautiful. We had a little spot on the lawn and we were looking at all the people taking photos of the cherry blossoms. And then people would come up to us and one lady was like a tourist, she's like passing us money and
I know.
little kids were like
We didn't
playing
even
and
have a
then
hat
you
out.
yeah, and then I loved it that you have like egg shakers and all kinds of percussion that you started just handing them to the kids as they were coming closer to listen to our music and they were playing along with us and it was just an amazing experience, a community experience of music,
Yeah.
really.
Yes,
Yeah,
I loved that day. And I remember it was totally accidental that we went during like it was a specified day for Queen Elizabeth Park that people were
that's right.
encouraged to go look at the cherry blossoms on that particular
Yeah,
day. And so we set up shop as though it was intentional, but it's like,
yeah,
no, we just want to play in the beauty of this park, the beauty of the
exactly.
sunshine. But then
Exactly.
what was a gift for us, which was our friendship, our mutual love of music,
Hmm.
then when put on display became a gift for others. And yeah,
Yeah,
as you say, I remember like the little kids coming up, the parents that were happy
yeah,
and excited,
yeah.
random tourists asking us in broken English if they could take our photos as
Yes,
though we
yes.
were. I mean, every person is special, but we
Yes.
were just enjoying the outdoors.
And I think even so, we were playing ukulele a lot together. And at one point, I guess, because do you know the Vancouver ukulele group? But how did we somehow you were able to get an invite to this Christmas ukulele concert with a whole bunch of seniors? Can you explain how that happened?
Oh my gosh. So again, I think the beauty of diving into the things that give you joy lead to all kinds of unexpected experiences that you can't plan, but you're just grateful that they evolve. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, what happened was many years ago, a friend, I think it was our mutual friend, Michael, who told
Yes.
me that there's this group called the Burnaby Ukulele
Okay.
Circle. And so when I started learning ukulele, he's like, look, this is often the best way to learn because you're with other people. And if you're bad, you get drowned out, but you also learn, so you get
Yeah.
better. And
Yeah.
so I remember going to that, but then thinking, gosh, I live at the time in the heart of Vancouver. Why am I driving over to Burnaby? So I
Hmm.
looked online and saw that there was a Vancouver ukulele circle, same idea, except actually way bigger. It was like 100 people who gather monthly.
Wow.
And so I started going to that and I got on the email list. And not only did my ukulele skills vastly improve, but
Mhm.
every now and then the email list would be sent messages about different opportunities for ukulele enthusiasts. And
Right.
so last, I think it was early fall,
Yeah.
an email went out to that group saying that a church in on Canby Village, when the big Canby light show happens around Christmas time,
Yeah.
was going to be having a Christmas market, and they were basically recruiting ukulele players to play ukulele Christmas songs during their market. And so I
Yeah.
thought, why not?
Why
So then
not?
I shared it with you, and you're like, why not?
I
And
was
then it was
totally
like
game.
only geriatrics besides us had said, why not?
Why not?
But I had the time of my life, you had the time
Me
of your life, and
too.
and
Me
the
too.
yeah, the sweet
Yeah.
old people that played
Yeah.
with us,
Yeah.
they were a delight and they adored us too.
Yeah. I think they thought we were the experts, but I'm just as a beginner. You're more of an expert. You've been playing a lot longer than I have.
Well, a few years.
It's just so much fun. It's just honestly, it's so much fun to share that
Mhm.
music and see the joy in people who are listening. And yeah,
And I think the key is each person identifying for them what is that thing that unlocks one's joy. I know
mhm.
for a couple of my friends, it is drawing a blank, but the clay pottery.
Yes, pottery.
I have several friends that pottery for them is like ukulele for me. They just
Right,
absolutely love
right.
going to a studio, doing pottery by themselves or with
Mhm.
strangers, and then again, they forge friendships with people who have that interest. So
Yes,
whatever someone's interest is, I know for other people, it's painting.
yes,
It could be dancing, whatever it
yes,
is. But
yes.
to identify those things, it really is like food for the soul.
Totally, totally. Now, you have a little ukulele that you've aptly named Little Joy. Do you mind just holding her up for us?
Yes, I
So
actually
I
brought
don't
little
want
joy.
this is
So
recording, but yeah,
I
it's just so
actually, so this is my soprano ukulele, which
beautiful.
is a pineapple shape, which is a
Yeah,
little unique. Mostly ukuleles are the shape of a guitar body, but just
yeah,
really small.
yeah.
So for the listeners who may not realize this, I always like to say the ukulele is not a toy. It's a serious instrument that has 4 sizes. So this is my little Joy, who's a soprano, but then I have one size up, which is the same as your size, which is a concert ukulele, which I call Big Joy. And then there's the tenor and the baritone. Yeah. And the great thing about ukulele is because it's so small. I mean, it's portable. Yeah. You can take it on an airplane, put it under the seat in front of you. It's great.
It is so great. And like for our listeners, like ukulele is such a fun and easy instrument to learn because there's only 4 strings. And like one of the chords is just, you hold one finger on one of the frets. And that's in most songs, like the chord C, you know, that's in almost all the songs. And it's just it's honestly so much fun and easy to pick up and, you know, can perfect too.
Mm-hmm. You know what that makes me think of, Lisa, is besides the importance of identifying that thing for someone, which is a joy giver, is another lesson that comes to mind from our conversation is the importance of teaching another. We learn better when we teach others. It reinforces what we're taking in when we have to send it out, in a sense. And even just you mentioning how easy it is to learn the ukulele makes me think of that last fall when you and I were really spending a lot of time together. We were able to, in part because we lived so close, because at the time I was spending a few months living at my cousin's house who lives close to you. And I started practice. It was so great. Yeah. And so she has 3 kids, 2 of whom she asked me to start teaching the ukulele to. And so I then had to think, well, why do I do what I do? How do I strum? And I remember after teaching my niece and nephew, my second cousins, I guess technically they are, I consider them nieces and nephews, but they're my cousin's kids. After teaching them, I then learned how to explain better to others how they can learn the ukulele. So to give a very simple lesson to communicate the 4 most important chords. Yeah. The most common chord is the C chord, as you mentioned. It's just one finger. And I like to say it's the ring finger, and it takes 3 to get married. So the ring finger, it takes 3 to get married, you, your spouse, and God. You go 1, 2, 3 frets down. You play C. Perfect. Then this finger here is like, use me, use me. So you take your ring finger off and stretch the longest finger all the way to the 2nd fret. And now you've got A minor. This finger is just hanging out here saying, use me. So you keep the middle finger down, you put that there, you've got F. And then I'm going to keep the pointy finger on the top. I'm going to move my middle finger over one. This finger, which is just hanging out, is going to be tucked in. G7, C, A minor, F, G7. As you know, you've got a song. Any song now.
Absolutely. That's incredible. Thank you for that lesson, Stephanie. It's so great though. It's so fun to share. And like when you find something that really brings you joy, you just want to share it with others. And that's what I find, you know, so it's so great. I'm thinking about all the different coffee shops that we've been to together. And like we bump into different people and we meet people at these coffee shops when we're writing, and it's very fascinating, like hearing other people's stories. Is there one that really stands out for you in your mind?
Okay. So 2 encounters come to mind. One, actually, well, oh my gosh, now they're all flooding back. So many encounters. Okay. Well, we'll start with the first one that came to mind was Small Victory or Simple Victory. I'm forgetting the
Small
name.
Victory.
Small Victory. Oh my gosh. On Granville Street.
Yes.
Great coffee shop.
Great.
And I remember you and I went there to work. So I am self-employed. So I can work during the work days at coffee shops. Of course, you have to go to your office, but when you had either a day off or it was the weekend or an afternoon, then we would go. And I think this was a weekend, or it might have been an early evening, but we went, and then I don't know which one of us started, but we just started talking to the man next to us. Yeah. He asked us a question, I think. And I just got this sense, he seems kind of down.
Yeah.
And so then my kind of type A personality wanted to be like, I have work to do. I came here to do work. I have to get my work done. But then, the Christian heart in me was like, I'm sensing I need to engage this human being. He's an image bearer like me, and maybe God is wanting us to connect. And so, I remember starting to talk to him. You then started talking with him. And do you remember that conversation?
I do. Yeah. I remember him talking, and I think he was asking about our writing. And I was talking about how I was writing about mental health for a column. And then he's like, oh yeah. And then he just started kind of telling a little bit of his life story and like really opening up. And then I remember like kind of giving like, I think through our conversation, I think we left him with a little bit more hope though. Like he did seem quite sad when he was sitting there having his coffee and he looked kind of down. But I think through our conversation and kind of being like kind of bubbly and chipper, but not even just start connecting with him and listening to him. I think it was because we
Right.
really listened to him, him telling a story that he left a little bit happier, I think,
Mm-hmm.
just being
I
listened.
totally recall, yeah, that change in his disposition. That the whole reason why I thought, okay, I should engage him is I'm just, maybe it's female intuition, but I'm like picking up that there's something really down about his spirit.
Yes.
And I also think because I was working on my book, I had several books with me. I'm not sure if it was
Right.
John O'Leary's On Fire book, which is, again, as
Mhm.
you mentioned, one of the things that really
Yes.
bonded us doing that book study. But I had a book like that. Oh
Yes.
no, you know what? I use that book in my book, but
Yes.
it was the guy who's considered the guardian of the Golden Gate Bridge. When people want to commit
Yes.
suicide, he's the police
Yes.
officer that patrols the bridge and tries to talk people down. And he's hugely
Yes.
successful in giving them
Yes.
hope. And I think I had that book. And then he
That's right.
noticed that book. And then I ended up like leaving him the title and the author.
Yes.
So yeah, like
Yes.
when we're in public, it's so important to remember engage the other, which is super
Yes.
important in this
Yes.
season of
Totally.
isolation and fear. It's like, no, we are communal creatures. We are made for
Absolutely.
connection, we're made for
Absolutely.
relationship, and we're made to be noticed. And so when you look at someone, when you smile, when you
Mhm.
engage them, if they don't want to talk, they won't talk. But if you
Mhm.
start to engage and then they respond to that with further engagement, then perhaps the greatest gift you can give someone that day is to partake in what Pope Francis calls the culture of encounter, truly
Mhm.
engaging and encountering the other.
Absolutely. I can think of another encounter. We were at a mall across from City Hall, and they had a piano that you could play after 4 p.m. And we just discovered it one day. And so you play piano very well. And so you were playing piano. We were singing our little hearts out. And Felix is the gentleman's name, the senior who comes up with his cane, walks over with his cane, and he's listening. I think he might have even been singing along with one of the songs we were singing.
I think so.
And we just had a conversation after, and he was kind of giving us tips on where to go for dancing to meet people. It was so
Yeah.
cute. But yeah, again, it's just music and just sharing your gift with other people. It really opens up people's hearts. And honestly, when people are going through mental health struggles, the best thing is to be able to reach out to someone and say, I need help. And like, I'm not doing well. And so, having your friendship, like I remember in the September of 2019, of, the fall that we were really spending a lot of time together, I did go through a very dark season, maybe 2 weeks of a depression that was really hard. And I remember you texted me and you're like, hey, I'm at the coffee shop, purebred, want to come join writing. And so it was so great to have that connection and be able to, have that time with someone. Just even being in your presence, honestly, I think really helped me calm down and ground myself and remember that I'm not alone and that I don't
Right.
have to do it alone, that we're not alone. We have community, and that is hugely important. And it's been such an impact on my mental health. And I think that's why I do so well, is because I have a strong network of friends and family that I can turn to in times of depression, in times of mania. And
Mhm.
that has been key to my health, really.
Absolutely. The presence of another. It doesn't, as you say, have to be direct engagement. Like we would meet up. Of course, we'd chat initially, but then we
Mm-hmm.
both would dive into our work, but we knew we were there with the other. It makes
Mm-hmm.
me think of that cousin of mine that you live so close to, Belinda, and how she had multiple surgeries a couple of years ago, was in the hospital a lot. And one of the things she would say to me is, can you do your work in my hospital room? She's like, I promise I won't disturb you. I
Yeah.
won't talk to you, but just to know that there was another body in the room that was there for her and knew her,
Yes.
that was enough to
Mm-hmm.
give her just a spirit of peace. And you experienced that. Of course, I experienced it too, just having you to work with. And that's something I've thought of now as I work from home. I'm like, gosh, I wish I could go to a coffee shop with Lisa.
Totally. Totally. Do you have a favorite coffee shop moment that from our time together last year?
Well, if we go strictly with coffee shops, and we have not even tackled Rocky Mountain
That's
Flatbread Company.
true. We need to talk about Rocky Mountain Flatbread, my favorite restaurant on Main Street.
By the way, I feel like these restaurants and coffee shops should be giving us a discount for
They
giving them
totally
shout
should.
outs.
I have to get some free pizza and coffee.
If we were to just go with coffee shops, then I would say Purebred on, I think it's Fifth Avenue.
Yeah.
And you and I had gone on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And one of the things we kind of had started labeling our Sundays, what was it, like Soul Sunday or something?
Soul Sundays or Self-Care Sunday.
Self-Care Sunday.
Self-Care Sunday.
Yeah, we really entered into, obviously, as practicing Catholics, like this is the Lord's Day. It's a day of rest.
Yeah.
So it's going to incorporate Mass.
Yeah.
But then what other things can we do that truly are rest, that restore us and prepare us for the week ahead? Absolutely. And so I remember it was one of our self-care Sundays, and we both had decided to bring, so not like, especially for me, my classic work, but like, I think I brought like a poetry book for me to write poetry, or just a regular book to read. You had a book to read, and we decided we were going to go and have coffee. Yeah. And so we go into Purebred, and the guy behind the counter, I remember looking at this cookie, and it was separated from all the other baked goods. And anyone who knows Purebred knows it's like a feast for the eyes.
It's laden. It's like a harvest time of pastries.
Yes. Yes. It's like a diabetic's nightmare, but yes, there's a lot of sugar. So all this food is on display. And I remember there was this one cookie off on its own. And so I asked the guy, what type of cookie is that? And he had this very thick German accent. Now I'm great at a Scottish accent. I can't really do a German accent, so I probably butcher it. I try to say what he said, but what he said sounded like he was saying it's a solitary cookie. And I'm like, a solitary cookie? What is a solitary cookie? And then so I said solitary cookie, and then he repeated it again, and I repeated it again, and he looked confused and I looked confused. And then I was like, what type of cookie is it? And he's like, sour cherry. And I'm like, oh, sour cherry, not solitary. But it was by itself, so it seemed like a solitary cookie.
It was so funny. I remember laughing so hard after that. It was so funny.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yeah. So that stands out, I think, because as you say, you laughed so hard. It's moments of levity, moments of laughter that really comes to mind. And then we went outside and started drinking our coffees. And I don't know, we are like magnets to geriatric men, right? This old man, remember he came up and started talking with us. And so we were engaging him back. And so
I think it was great. Pulled over just to come into the coffee shop because they saw us having such a good time outside.
I know. Once again, we should have, discounted rates at the coffee shops.
You also bring up a really good point. Like we were also writing poetry together for many of our times together. We would, like, especially at Rocky Mountain Flatbread, Wine Wednesdays or Sangria Fridays. I can't remember. Like, we just spent a lot of time eating.
There was so much wine, so much sangria, you can't remember which day.
That was so fun because it was so creative and just kind of spur of the moment. I remember we were engaging our server, Caleb, who was taking a writing class at UBC, and he's like, oh, that's so cool. And so we were reading our poetry to him, and he was very kind and said, that's good. That's very good. And, it was just so much fun to really connect and just be there. I've been there many times since we've had our poetry times together. And it's different now with COVID, of course, with the pandemic, it's so different. But I have had dinners there and brunches, and it's just something about the atmosphere. Like, atmosphere plays a whole role into it when you're creative too, I find. But really, it's that I think what is inspiring is that you're a writer and you're inspiring me as a writer. Today I have to show you this book, Stephanie. I know our podcast listeners can't see this, but I got a book today in the mail called Writers Inspiring Writers by Matthew Kelly.
Gosh, by Matthew Kelly. I love Matthew Kelly.
That's awesome. And the thing is, it's 365 days of quotes from writers about writing.
Love it. What's the quote for today? Well, we need the quote for today. What is it? October 9th, even though this is going to air on October 9th.
Here we go. Pulling it out for
Okay.
you. Okay, October 9th. Turn up for work. Discipline allows creative freedom. No discipline equals no freedom. And that's by Jeanette Winterson.
Man, I needed that earlier today. I
Did
was
you?
having
Yeah.
discipline issues. Yeah, I'm going to remember that for Monday.
It's so true. It's so
That's
good.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and again, this, I think also a true sign of a beautiful friendship is it's not independence, there's not dependence, but it's an interdependent relationship, which as I've also felt our friendship again is it's just organically and naturally evolved. So I'm so glad to hear that my writing and activities inspired you, but so did your writing inspire me. And in fact, I really got into poetry. I've always been poetic. I'll write little ditties for family on their birthdays and write it
Yeah.
in the card. But with you, I started really being inspired to not just write the classic rhyming poems, but like the short, almost at times with what was going on in my life, angsty reflections, but things that really pull at the emotions. And then poetry became a way of expressing my inner life. It also, I was very inspired by your poetry, which then influenced my poetry, to really have awe and wonder in the little moments. So
Mm-hmm.
because we would then text each other different poems we wrote, what I'd read from you would give me inspiration. So I remember, again, I mean, your neighborhood, my cousin's neighborhood, is just so beautiful. It's like the best in Vancouver.
I
And
love
so the
it.
trees are gorgeous. Fall time, you've got these, golden yellow leaves. And so I remember, as a result of my friendship with you, really having awe in the beauty of our neighborhood, because I then thought I'm going to write a poem about it.
Yeah.
So poetry tapped into what's so important, which is to really enter into the present moment. And so often we don't pay attention to the beauty around us, the people around us, the moments going on, because we're staring at a screen. And so I remember being far more intentional about what my surroundings were and how I felt about those surroundings, and the beauty, the goodness that were kind of welling up within me. And then in my particular case, I then expressed it in written form. Again, for other people, it might be through art, it might be through dance, whatever. But for me, it really became an outlet to express what I was living and experiencing. And I then lived and experienced in a deeper way because of it.
Mm-hmm. So beautiful, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And when you were writing, you were also drawing, like you find a lot of speakers or different amazing people in the world who are doing great work, like Henry Fraser, who's a paraplegic. He was, paralyzed very young, but he's an artist and he paints and he does speaking engagements. And I remember reading his book after you had shared it with me. But there was somebody else who has inspired both of us because of his life, very short life, to be honest, and how he wrote a book, and he called it his heart song. Can you tell the listeners about Maddies.
Oh my gosh, yes. So I learned about Maddies just over a year ago. So here we are, October. I think it was September of 2019. And I was at a pro-life dinner that Raymond Arroyo from EWTN in the US was speaking at. It was happening in North Vancouver. And during his talk, he spoke about this little boy named Maddies whose cause for canonization actually has been opened in the Catholic Church. Yeah, totally incredible. So when he described this boy, I was blown away. And so I thought, well, I need to look into this, but I didn't look into it right away. And then I was visiting my aunt and she said, oh, I read this article I think you'd be interested in. And then it was about Maddies. So here I've got like this speaker and my aunt who in no way are connected, both telling me about this Maddies. So that to me is always a sign that I should pay attention to something and look deeper into it. So then I started researching Maddie and reading up on his heart songs, his poetry, his expressions of all that was going on in his soul and his observations of the world, and not just how the world was, but how he thought the world ought to be. And he was this precious little boy that had such a belief in the need for peace and love in a time where there's so much fracturing in human relations. But perhaps what's most significant about Maddie was that he had was born with a very debilitating condition that took the lives of 3 of his older siblings, and doctors had predicted would take his life shortly after birth, but he didn't die. And so even though he eventually was confined to a wheelchair and was suffering greatly and going through so much pain, he continued to write poetry and became this, I would call him a wise little sage. I mean, he was just profound. And so the most pivotal moment for him in kind of the world knowing Maddie was when he was, I think it was 11 years old. He was essentially on his deathbed. And it was clear that his condition was going to take away his life. And his mom describes, I think he was bleeding out of his fingers. And there's so much of him. He was just falling apart, literally, physically. But the family had a relic of who is now Saint Andre from Quebec. But at the time, he was Brother Andre, yet to be declared a saint. And so Maddie had been given this relic of him, and Maddie's chest basically internally would have been, his trachea, I think, would have been bleeding, and it was scabbing. And the doctors worried that when the scab broke, he basically would suffocate to death. Maddie held that relic next to his dying body. And he said, Brother Andre, you need a miracle to be a saint. And I need a miracle right now to fulfill my mission. And instantly the bleeding stopped. Doctors didn't believe he was temporarily healed. And Maddie's like, I want to go home. And the doctor's like, you can't go home. Like, this is the end. Long story short, it wasn't the end. And so for the next 3 years of Maddie's life, he had 3 wishes that were fulfilled. Wish 1, he wanted to be on the Oprah show because he wanted to share his poetry with the world.
Yeah.
Wish 2 was he wanted his poems published, and they were, and they became New York Times bestsellers. Wish 3 was he wanted to speak to former US President Jimmy Carter because he had done a high school assignment about him and saw how much Jimmy had really believed in working for peace and the different things he had done. And Maddie had this big passion, obviously, to create world peace. So here he is, almost on his deathbed, temporarily recovers enough to continue living for 3 years, which became the 3 most public and influential years of his life, where he became known around the world. And so I remember it was one evening, I came home totally pumped, went over to your house, told you about Maddies to Panic, and we sat and watched his interview on Larry King Live when he was like 11 and a half.
It was so incredible. And we watched YouTube video after YouTube video. And even his mom too is such an amazing, inspiring person too, because she ended up having the same disease that he had later on in life.
That's right. So what they didn't realize as she was having her children who were born sick and then dying was that she was the genetic carrier of this condition. And so she ended up developing the adult onset version of it. I also heard that in more recent years, she's had cancer. So, I mean, she's in a wheelchair, she's on a ventilator, she's had to bury 4 children. I mean, she has gone through so much suffering, and yet she wakes up every day and thanks God that she's alive. Thanks God that she has another day. And so I just think, the word that you live by, resilience, is absolutely captured by Maddie Stepanek and his mom, Jenny, that no matter what adversity they face, they see the gift of their lives as having meaning and being more important than the difficulties that are in their midst. And they don't allow themselves to be overtaken by the hardship.
Absolutely. It's such a beautiful story. And that's why I wanted you to share it, and it's true, like, having gone through such a difficulty and a dark time in my life, I now too have this kind of zest for life. Like, I want to be here. I want to be alive. I'm here for a reason. There's a purpose for my life. And it's, discovering that day by day, but I now look forward instead of dreading. And there's times, again, like there's seasons, of course, of low to moods and high moods because of the nature of bipolar disorder, but this deep knowledge and this deep conviction that it is good to be here, it is good to be alive, like that just resonates throughout me, and I'm sure it does for you too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And when you encounter someone really living that way, then it does have an impact on us, as we both were so profoundly touched by by Maddie. And I mean, let's take Oprah as an example. She, in the end, when she'd heard his story, I mean, there are so many people that reach out to Oprah and say, oh, we have a really powerful story for your show. And she's probably like, yeah, I get that, 1,000 times a day.
Yeah.
But she sent a producer out to learn more about this kid, and thought, oh my goodness, when they learned more, yeah, we need him on the show. And then he ended up being on her show multiple times. And Oprah went to his funeral. Jimmy Carter went to his funeral. I mean,
Wow.
what 13-year-old boy has world leaders, former presidents at their funeral? But Oprah, who has had thousands upon thousands of guests on her show, has said that in all her years of interviewing people, there are maybe 5 who have been individuals that she has maintained a real friendship with beyond the interview. And Maddie Stepanek, she said, was one of those people. They would regularly email, talk on the phone over the 3 years until he passed away. So yeah, everyone listening, I can't say enough good about Maddie Stepanek and how great it would be for you to Google him, because you will be blessed learning about this little boy.
Yeah. It's so amazing. And it's so incredible to think that a little boy could have such a big impact. And we don't, and that's the thing, like, we don't realize how much of an impact a smile is for someone, how much that friendship is for someone. And, no good, like every good, there's always a ripple effect. Like it just keeps getting bigger, right? And that's what I feel with our friendship. And, I have many friends, and it just has this life-giving, it's like in a forest too. I always go back to this quote, but in the book of The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wohlleben, he talks about how there's a root system in the forest with trees. And when there's a sick tree, the other trees around it send nutrients through the root systems to help the sick tree. And that's incredible. Like, so in our community, in our friendships, we really nurture each other, and and there's seasons for one for the other. And it's like just like in nature, our human relationships really thrive. And it's just such a blessing, and it's such a great gift, honestly.
Absolutely. It makes me think of a quote by St. John Paul II, who said, in a document he wrote called Salvifici Doloris, on the Christian meaning of human suffering, he said, suffering unleashes love. And that's exactly from the secret life of, or hidden life of trees, as you say, what's going on from a botanist perspective. But yeah, if one tree is kind of dying or dwindling, then nutrients, what does it do? Well, it's in a sense suffering, and it's unleashing, support from other trees. But that's what we humans are supposed to be like. When we see someone who is suffering, it should cause, from deep within us, a profound desire for the other's good, a welling up of a great overflowing compassion. And then when someone becomes a recipient of love amidst their suffering, then it inspires them to want to help others. And so Maddie experienced, in the 3 years that he became known throughout the world, he endured much suffering. He was in constant pain. There were so many things he couldn't do, and he lived with the reality that he was one day closer to his death. We all are, but he was way closer than most. But he experienced so much love. And then in receiving love, he wanted to give love. He wanted to give inspiration. He wanted to give peace. And so that kind of should be the model that we aim to live our lives by.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think often that friendship is stronger than any medicine, and that just goes to show, with what Maddie's impact and your impact in my life, and, all the friends that I have, that light of friendship really can shine in our lives. And so, I just think about, like, for the listeners, just foster those friendships with each other, especially in this time, like when it's difficult, phone calls. Like I have a lot of friends I call up and talk on the phone while I'm doing dishes, or, seeing your friends and making those connections, because it really matters. It really matters.
Absolutely. And it's life-giving. And if anyone's listening thinking, well, I mean, you guys are really lucky because you've got your friendship, you've got other friends. Again, it comes back to what I said at the beginning is if someone's struggling in that area, looking for community, I think there are two angles one can come from in response. The first angle is to say, okay, well, what gives me joy? And then when you start to pursue those things, you will discover other people pursuing those same things. And then boom, you get your community. And then the other angle to also come from is to say, well, who needs help? And then as you step outside yourself and seek to address someone else's need, then you will also find that you will discover new community and connections that you didn't realize were out there. There's a great quote by Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, Dr. Viktor Frankl, who said, the more one forgets himself by giving himself to a cause to serve or a person to love, the more human he is. And so I think that should be the focus. Okay, how can I give myself to a cause to serve or a person to love? And the effect of that will be community, camaraderie, friendship.
Absolutely. That is so beautiful. I think we should just end the podcast right there at that quote. It's so beautiful. Yes. And Stephanie, like you've been writing books and you have a second one on the go. Where can people find more about you and about your books that are coming up or any of your speaking engagements? I know you have a couple of debates coming up soon. Where can people find more about you?
Yes, so people can go to my website, which is loveunleasheslife.com. So loveunleasheslife.com. And then from there, they can see my blog, info on my book, my upcoming book. I'll have a posting on that soon. And my schedule is there too. So loveunleasheslife.com.
So awesome. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving weekend. I know it's Thanksgiving weekend for us, and I know you're celebrating in the States. And I'm just so excited and happy that you could join today. And I look forward to more of our virtual coffee dates coming soon.
Yes.
Okay.
And we'll write more poetry.
Exactly. Okay. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.